"You're in violation, Mr. Landry. That garage door isn't approved paint." Colleen Durrett stood with her clipboard cocked against her hip like a badge. Her smug smile didn't move as she flicked her eyes toward the mural, my wife's face painted in soft lavender and gold brushstrokes against sunset blues. "And you're holding a master key to my property. Why?" That made her blink. I stepped between her and the garage, slow and centered. "Careful, Colleen. The bylaws don't authorize forcible entry without written emergency cause. And this isn't an emergency. It's a painting." The clipboard lowered an inch. She didn't expect me to know that clause. Most residents didn't. But I'd helped write the policy guidelines used by half the federal contractors on the eastern seaboard before I ever retired. Michael Landry, retired federal compliance officer. I know exactly how power hides in procedural cracks, and how to break it apart with a paperclip and the right statute. This garage? My wife painted it 6 months before the chemo silenced her hands. She wanted color where she knew darkness was coming. Sunflowers for the months she'd miss. A portrait of her and our son when he graduated from basic. She finished it in the fall, died that winter. I didn't repaint it because it's not just paint. It's her presence. I still talk to her sometimes in the evenings, under that mural. Lucas hears me, I know he does, and when he comes home in uniform, he still parks under her smile. You want to call that non-compliance? You better bring an army. "Look, we've given you 2 warnings, Colleen said, trying to recover her rhythm. "You've ignored both. If it's not corrected by end of month, the board will escalate. Legal route if needed." Behind her, a city maintenance truck rumbled past, rattling with tools and paint buckets. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Escalate away," I said. "Just be ready to explain how you plan to enforce bylaws from an HOA whose incorporation lapsed 5 years ago." She stared. Just for a second. Just enough. "You don't know what you're talking about." "No," I shrugged. "Maybe not. Or maybe you should have checked with the Secretary of State before you brought a master key to my mural." She pulled her hand from her pocket like I'd burned it. I didn't push. Yet. It wasn't time to reveal everything. Not yet. Not the defunct articles, the missing renewals, the internal inconsistencies tucked into the voting procedures. But she'd feel it now, the beginning of weight under her feet. I've seen stronger women than her fall apart when due process finally catches up with ego. Lucas opened the front door, his boots heavy on the porch steps, full dress uniform, cap tucked under his arm. Colleen turned just enough to see him. She stopped breathing. "Is there a problem, sir?" Lucas said, voice clipped like he was back in formation. Calm, cold. She stepped back, instinctively. "No problem," I said for her. "Ms. Durrett was just leaving." He didn't smile, just nodded once, slow and silent, and leaned against the railing where his mother's swing used to hang. Colleen turned, tight-jawed, and walked fast down the sidewalk like her heels had started to blister. I stared after her, hands folded, watching the way she refused to look back. That mural will outlast her. It's sealed in my wife's paint and my son's silence. That's not something you threaten with a fine. She thinks this is about color. She thinks this is about compliance. But this neighborhood was built on memory, not uniformity. And if she keeps pushing, she's going to find out what happens when someone like me, someone who understands the rules down to their rot, decides to follow every one of them, exactly. You watching from a place like this? Ever had someone try to legislate grief out of your home? Stay with me. Colleen just declared war on the wrong man. The next morning, I walked the trail behind our row of houses, the one that loops past the dog park and ends at the clubhouse bulletin board. Colleen had nailed up another notice overnight, red bordered like a traffic ticket, the way she liked to make things look more official than they were. I wasn't the only one staring at it. "Third time this month," Harold said, folding his arms across his chest. He was a retired biology teacher with a limp from a hip replacement and a stubborn love for gardening. I glanced at the paper. Unapproved flora installation, lot 114. That was Harold. He'd added a small trellis with red hibiscus last weekend. "She said they don't match the existing aesthetic," he muttered. "Meanwhile, she's got a damn flamingo statue in her front yard." I didn't laugh. It wasn't funny anymore. The trail had turned into a lineup of casualties. Amy was fined for using a recycled glass mailbox she'd won in a charity auction. Mrs. Ramos had to remove her potted tomatoes because they were agriculturally inappropriate for front-facing views. Someone else got a citation for using white curtains instead of beige. Beige, which apparently was the HOA's favorite shade of oppression. "She's doing this to everyone," I said. Harold nodded. But no one stopped her. "They're afraid of liens," said a voice from behind us. I turned. It was Dana Tran, a newer neighbor from across the Greenbelt. She ran a remote accounting firm, sharp-eyed and always polite. She held up her own violation letter like it was a parking ticket, unapproved driveway surface material. "I use gray sealant," she said. "Gray. You know how many shades of gray concrete naturally turns?" "Too many for Colleen," I murmured. Dana folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. "We're not all retired, Michael. Some of us don't have time to fight this. She counts on that." She was right. It wasn't that people agreed with Colleen. They just didn't want the noise, the fees, the stress. She'd weaponized exhaustion. "I don't mind rules," Harold said. "I just mind when they get used like a cattle prod." I took a breath and looked at the bulletin board. Half of it was filled with infractions, warnings, policy updates, no birthday notices, no barbecue invites, no welcome messages. That's when I noticed the bottom corner, a weathered sheet half torn, curling at the edges. Board elections, last held. March 2017, 8 years ago. That couldn't be right. I leaned in. "Did we really not have another one since then?" I asked. Dana frowned. "I moved in 3 years ago. Never saw one." Harold shook his head. "I remember that one. She won uncontested. That nagging itch behind my temple, the one I got when something didn't add up, started pulsing. Uncontested elections," I murmured. "No open ballots, and no posted nominations since then." Something about that would matter later. I didn't know how yet, but I'd seen enough internal audits in my day to know when the machinery of power hadn't been serviced in too long. It starts to rust in the dark. I stepped away from the board. "Thanks," I said. "For what?" Dana asked. "For reminding me who Colleen's really afraid of." I walked back along the trail with the sun on my back and my thoughts running faster than my feet. This wasn't just about my mural. It never was. Colleen was running a private fiefdom using HOA letterhead and half-forgotten rules as weapons. She was hoping no one looked too close, that no one cared enough to dig, that we were all just too tired to fight. But I wasn't tired. Not yet. Lucas was waiting on the porch when I got back, a cup of coffee in each hand. He didn't ask where I'd gone. "Dad," he said, "you okay?" I took the cup, sat beside him. "Not yet," I said. "But I will be." And if Colleen kept pushing, she'd find out just how dangerous an old man with time and a memory could be. The conference room smelled like new laminate and old coffee. HOA meetings always did. The air conditioner hummed like it was trying not to listen. Lucas and I arrived early and sat near the back, right under the flickering wall sconce that Colleen never seemed to fix, probably because it wasn't in her line of sight. She entered 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 junior board members and a man in a light blue shirt already fidgeting with his pen. That was Franklin Meyer, HOA secretary, retired CPA. Looked like he was born to sort receipts. He sat stiffly at the table, shoulders square but eyes avoiding mine. Not out of guilt, more like uncertainty, like a man who knew what line he'd crossed, but hadn't yet figured out how far from the edge he was. Colleen slapped a stack of folders onto the table. "Let's call it to order." Lucas shifted beside me, quiet. He didn't need to speak. His uniform did that for him. Colleen's eyes caught his sleeve again, just like they had in the driveway. This time, she didn't look away fast enough. "First order of business," she said, voice clipped. "Lot 212, Michael Landry, continued noncompliance regarding exterior appearance. Recommended fine is $75 per day, retroactive to the original notice." Franklin flinched, not enough to draw gasps. Just a small hitch in his motion, like a record skipping a beat. He shuffled the papers in front of him, didn't raise his head. One of the junior board members, a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, asked, "Is the mural a safety issue?" Colleen stiffened. "It's about visual uniformity." "Did we ever define uniformity formally?" he asked. Colleen's smile was too wide. "It's implied in the guidelines. We don't need every detail spelled out." Franklin turned a page too quickly. The papers rasped. A few slipped off the table. He reached down, and as he picked them up, I caught it. His hand trembled. He wasn't a weak man. I'd seen him carry bulk mulch with one hand last summer. This wasn't physical. It was mental. The kind of shake you get when your conscience wants to speak but hasn't been given permission. "Michael," Colleen said, locking eyes with me now, "do you have anything to add before we vote on enforcement?" I stood slowly. "Just one thing." I stepped forward. Lucas stayed seated. "You posted an election date from 8 years ago. Haven't had one since. Your term expired 5 years ago under the original bylaws." She laughed. "That's not how it works." "It is, and Franklin knows it." Silence fell like a curtain. Franklin didn't look up. His knuckles whitened around his pen. He glanced at the paper in front of him, but didn't read it. I saw him blink twice, long and slow, like he was stalling time. "I believe that's a misinterpretation," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you?" I said. "Because I've already requested a records check from the Secretary of State's office. The incorporation status? Expired. No renewal on file." Colleen's smile faltered, just a fraction. "That doesn't affect enforcement authority," she said quickly. "Doesn't it?" I asked. "Then why do your own guidelines cite that authority as derived from the original charter?" Franklin shifted again. Sweat beaded at the base of his hairline. I didn't press him, not here. He was still figuring out whether he was complicit or cornered, but I saw the doubt setting in. He was watching Colleen now, not me. She barked out a final sentence. "We'll adjourn for review. Meeting closed." The gavel fell harder than necessary. Franklin stood and walked out like his shoes were filled with gravel. Outside the room, he paused, turned slightly. Not enough to face me fully, but just enough to speak over his shoulder. "Michael, if you have questions about the minutes, come by my place sometime." Then he walked off into the parking lot, not waiting for a reply. Lucas and I stood there a moment longer. "You think he's going to turn?" he asked. "He's already leaning," I said. All we had to do was give his conscience permission. Ever seen someone on the inside start to crack like that? What would you do if you were Franklin? Let me know in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. The envelope was waiting for me the next morning, certified, stiff, and smug. Lucas had set it on the porch swing beside my coffee. I picked it up like it might bite. The return address wasn't Colleen's house. She wasn't that clumsy. It was the HOA mailbox we all paid for, but none of us had keys to. The seal cracked open with a smooth tear. Inside, 2 pages. The first was a formal enforcement letter. The second, a fine schedule that looked like it was printed off some generic template, but with my name typed in bold and all caps. Violation. Unauthorized exterior modification. Fine, $75 per day. Retroactive to first warning. Balance, due, $1,200. Action pending, lien authorization upon non-payment after 14 days. I sat back against the swing. The wood creaked beneath me. Lucas stepped onto the porch a moment later, still in his workout shirt, towel slung over one shoulder. He handed me a bottle of water without asking what was in the letter. I passed it to him anyway. He read both pages without blinking. "She's actually threatening a lien over paint." "It's not paint," I said quietly. He gave a slow nod. "Right." The mural shimmered slightly in the morning light, the brushstrokes catching a warm orange tone that made my chest hurt. Her eyes, Emma's, were exactly the way she painted them in the mirror, a little tilted, a little tired, but always focused forward. "Can she do that?" he asked. I exhaled. "Depends. If the HOA's in good standing, maybe. But if the corporation doesn't legally exist, they've got no enforcement teeth. She doesn't think you'll fight it. She thinks no one will." He folded the pages and tapped them against his leg. "What happens if we don't pay? She files the lien through the county. It attaches to the title. Could mess with future sale, insurance. Worst case, she tries to foreclose, but that'd be a stunt. Cost more than it's worth. She willing to go that far?" I looked out at the row of houses, beige, identical, sterile. "She wants a win," I said. "Doesn't care who she runs over to get it." He nodded, then looked back at the mural. "You gonna let her?" "No." "Not now?" She'd escalated it. Formal letter, financial penalty, legal implication. All without authority she didn't actually have. That was arrogance. And in my experience, arrogance leaves a trail. I grabbed my phone and opened the Notes app. I started listing every move she'd made in the last month, every fine, every inconsistency, every conversation I could recall with dates. I wasn't going to out-argue her. I was going to build a file. I tapped save and slipped the phone into my pocket. Then I walked back inside and pulled open the old filing cabinet in the hallway closet. Not for stored HOA documents, but for my own records, work records, certifications. The paperwork I still had from my time writing compliance code and auditing enforcement agencies for the feds. If Colleen wanted to test power, I'd remind her what a real audit looked like. Lucas lingered at the porch rail, arms crossed. You think the board knows what she's doing? They know what she tells them. And Franklin? He knows more than he's saying, I said. He's sweating through this now. Lucas smirked. Maybe he just needs someone to give him the words. Maybe. The mailbox clanked open down the street. Mail carrier. Same time, every day. And somewhere behind that, behind the letters and the notices and the printed fine sheets, I felt something shift. Not a big moment, just a turn in the current, like we weren't the ones reacting anymore. We were watching her play into her own trap. I picked up the fine letter again and read it once more. There, bottom line, Colleen had signed it, President Hillside Glen, HOA. But if the HOA hadn't renewed its incorporation, that title didn't exist. It was a costume she was still wearing, hoping no one looked at the label. She thought I was alone. She thought I was angry. She didn't know I was documenting. It took 2 phone calls, 1 redirected voicemail, and a 20-minute drive to get where I needed to be, the County Municipal Records Office on Jasper Avenue. Not flashy, brick exterior, faded flag, the kind of place where bureaucrats and papers share the same dry air. I stepped inside, and the air conditioning hit like an afterthought. Fluorescents buzzed. A young woman at the reception desk looked up, her expression somewhere between polite and permanently tired. HOA filings? I asked. She pointed left. Business registration and nonprofit inquiries, window 4. Window 4 was run by a man named Dave. White shirt. Wedding ring groove, but no ring. He glanced at the request form I filled out, skimmed the HOA name, and arched one brow without lifting his head. Hillside Glen HOA? He asked. Yep. He tapped at his keyboard with 2 fingers, slow and deliberate. You on the board? Homeowner, just doing some research before responding to an enforcement letter. He didn't ask more, just nodded like he'd heard worse. All right, let's pull the file. He stood and disappeared through a metal door behind him. I waited, eyeing the poster about sunshine law compliance, and wondering how many HOAs actually understood what that meant. When he returned, he was holding a file folder, thinner than it should have been. He slid it across the counter. Last filed annual renewal, March. 2018, nonprofit status lapsed in April of the same year. No updates, no new board elections filed. My eyes narrowed. So they've been operating without standing for, 5 years? Closer to 6, he said. Technically, if a nonprofit doesn't renew its registration and file annual reports, the state treats it as inactive, doesn't exist in legal terms. No powers to enforce contracts, collect dues, levy fines, nothing. I turned a page. No meeting minutes filed, no articles of amendment, not even a board roster. It wasn't just sloppy, it was dead. You sure this is current? He tapped the date stamp at the bottom of the cover sheet. This updates in real time with the Secretary of State database. You want a certified copy? I nodded. 3, actually. He didn't ask why. He just got to work. I stepped aside while he printed and embossed each document. My pulse was steady, but something behind my ribs was starting to shift, like pressure releasing from a valve that had been locked tight for years. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just Colleen being aggressive. It was illegitimate, illegally so. She had no legal foundation beneath her threats, no active corporate body to prop up her title. She was swinging a sword made of paper. I texted Lucas. Confirmed, HOA legally inactive. Doc's coming home. His reply came fast. Want me to cancel my flight? He'd been planning to return to base in 2 days. I hesitated. Give me 24 hours. If this cracks open the way I think it will, we'll need more than one witness. I looked back at Dave. Can I ask something? Sure. If someone files a lien using a defunct HOA's name, what happens? His answer was flat. Fraudulent filing, civil penalties, maybe criminal, depending on intent. I nodded slowly. Back home, Colleen's letter was probably still sitting on my counter, bold and threatening, but now it read different. Now it was more than a bluff. It was a mistake, one she'd put in writing. Dave slid the documents into a flat envelope and handed them over. "You good?" "More than," I said. He gave me a small, knowing smile. "Yeah, you look like a man about to ruin someone's Tuesday." By the time I got back to the car, my head was spinning, but in a good way. No more guesswork, no more doubt. I had her, and she didn't even know it yet. I didn't drive home immediately. I pulled into the park lot across from Hillside Glen and sat there for a few minutes, watching the rows of homes, same shutters, same fences, same mulch. But now I saw it differently. The uniformity wasn't order, it was a disguise, and I was about to pull the whole mask off. I didn't drive home. I drove to her. The cemetery was quiet, tucked behind a line of oaks where the wind moved like breath through branches. I parked by the third row and walked the rest. Gravel crunched beneath my shoes, soft and uneven, the kind of sound that fills the silence, without breaking it. Emma's headstone was simple. She wouldn't have wanted anything ornate, just her name, her dates, and the words still laughing, even now, a phrase she used to say when she caught me staring too long, too seriously. I stood in front of her stone and pulled the folder from under my arm. "I got her," I said. The wind didn't answer, but I could feel the quiet shift, like the trees had leaned in. "She's been bluffing for years, Colleen, running this HOA like it's her little kingdom, sending threats, fines, citations, all while the charter expired right under her heels." I sat on the bench nearby, the one Emma and I donated years ago. Her name was still etched into the plaque. I told myself it was just a matter of principle, just protecting your mural, but it's more than that. You saw it before I did. This whole place, it's a community, or it was, before fear and fines turned it into a checklist of beige rules. I held up the documents. "She doesn't have authority, Em, not a shred of it. The HOA isn't even a real entity anymore. The fines, the threats. She's got no legal ground, but everyone's still afraid of her. They think fighting back will cost more than it's worth." I looked over at the trees, the space beside her stone we'd reserved for me, someday. "But this fight's worth it." Lucas had offered to stay, but this part, this quiet acknowledgement, needed to be mine. Because the mural wasn't just her art, it was her goodbye, her fingerprint on the home we built. Every brushstroke was a memory she left behind. Knowing one day I'd be the only one left to defend it, I stood and placed one of the certified documents beside the flowers. Let the paper rest, where she could see I wasn't just angry. I was ready to turn everything she taught me into action, patience, precision, and when needed, pressure. "I don't need revenge," I murmured, "just correction." Colleen wanted a power play, but I wasn't going to push back with emotion. I was going to dismantle her structure one clause at a time. The next move had to be surgical, strategic, and I knew exactly where to begin. Franklin, he was the linchpin, the last man still holding her machine together. Reluctantly, nervously, he hadn't signed that last enforcement letter. She did, alone. And that told me more than she realized. If I showed him the truth, the real truth, he wouldn't be able to stay silent. He'd been sweating guilt at that meeting. Now it was time to let his conscience do the rest. I tucked the documents back into the folder and brushed my hand across Emma's stone. "I'll handle this. I promise." As I walked back to the car, a breeze passed through the trees again. A single sunflower petal had blown onto my windshield, likely from the bouquet by her grave. It stuck there for a moment, golden and stubborn. I didn't move it. Back in the driver's seat, I pulled out my phone and texted Lucas. "Target acquired. I'm going to talk to Franklin," he replied immediately. "Want backup?" I smiled. "Not yet. Let's see if truth still speaks louder than fear." I turned the key, engine humming to life beneath me. This wasn't over, not even close. But now I had direction. And the weight I'd carried for weeks, the frustration, the helplessness, the slow burn of watching good people fold, finally had somewhere to go. Colleen had fired the first shot. She just didn't realize I'd already loaded the counterstrike. Ever had to fight for something that meant more than it looked? Drop a comment and tell me, what would you protect no matter what? And where are you watching from? Franklin's house sat at the edge of the neighborhood, where the sidewalk stopped and the trees started. It was modest, single-story, brick, paint fading around the trim. The kind of house that didn't call attention to itself, just like the man inside. I knocked once on the side gate. It opened with a slow creak, revealing a narrow path around the garage. No words, just the sound of shuffling feet and a throat cleared more out of nerves than habit. He waited on the patio, seated in a green plastic chair that had seen too many summers. A pitcher of sweet tea sat between us on a plastic table, condensation running down the sides like it wanted to slip away unnoticed. "I figured you'd come," Franklin said, not looking at me. I nodded and sat across from him. Dusk rolled in slowly, painting everything in dull orange. The cicadas were out. So were the first streetlights, blinking to life like reluctant witnesses. "I went to the county," I said. "Got the filings." He finally met my eyes. "It's true then?" I slid the envelope onto the table, the seal broken. "Colleen hasn't filed since 2018. Technically, the HOA doesn't exist. Legally, it has no enforcement powers. Every fine, every letter, it's all unsupported. Just scare tactics on expired authority." Franklin didn't move. He just stared at the envelope like it might explode. "You knew something was wrong," I added. "Back at the meeting, you didn't sign the letter." His hands tightened around his glass. "I didn't want any part of that one." "Why not?" He swallowed hard. "Because she changed the language. The fine escalation clause, she added it without a vote, said it was within executive discretion." His jaw clenched. "We haven't had a formal board vote in over a year, Michael. We barely meet anymore. She runs everything by email and expectation." "Why stay?" He looked away. "Because I thought if I wasn't there, she'd get worse." "She already is." He exhaled, long and slow, like years of excuses were finally running out of room inside him. "I didn't want this," he said. "I joined to help with community maintenance, park upgrades, tree removals, stuff that made sense. And somehow I ended up co-signing nonsense about potted plants and paint shades. You're not alone, Franklin, but if you want out of this with your name intact, I need more than regret." He reached into a nearby folder, pulled out a single sheet. "Meeting minutes," he said. "From last March, the last time we voted on anything real, before she stopped documenting." I took the paper. It was typed, time-stamped, and initialed in the corner, Franklin's handwriting. "I made a copy for myself," he said. "Didn't know why at the time. The vote recorded, board terms were due to expire that year, unless re-elected via open ballot. No election followed. This was the thread. And I had the scissors. "You can still fix this?" I said. He didn't answer right away. Just stared out past the fence line, where the shadows of trees were getting longer. "If I help you," he said finally, "it'll burn what's left of my reputation." "No," I said. "It'll save it." He stood and walked to the screen door, paused. "She has a backup file," he said without turning. "On her laptop. Password protected, but she keeps a printout of violations in her den. Red folder, second shelf. She calls it the ledger." I blinked. "She keeps a physical record?" He nodded. "I think she likes seeing it, touching it. That tracked. She won't expect you to know it exists," he added. But I never told her I noticed. The door creaked open, then closed behind him. I sat there for a few moments, watching the sky bleed into violet. In my hands, the last board vote, the proof of the lapse, and a whispered lead on her deepest stash of records. Colleen had built her kingdom on silence and intimidation. But her secretary just handed me the first brick to pull from the bottom. I spread everything out on the kitchen table like it was an active crime scene, which, in a way, it was. The meeting minutes Franklin gave me, the certified documents from the county, the violation letters Colleen had mailed, and in the center, the sheet with her signature, the one claiming she was president of an entity that, legally, no longer existed. It felt like building a case file again. Except this time, I wasn't auditing some obscure federal contractor. This time, the defendant lived 3 blocks away. Lucas stepped in from his morning run and slowed when he saw the table. "That looks final." "It's starting to be," I said, circling a line in Franklin's minutes. "We've got procedural violation, expired authority, misuse of enforcement language, and now, thanks to him, a paper trail showing the last legitimate vote." He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. What's next? I build the legal notice, and I file a formal challenge against enforcement. Not just mine, anyone's. If I'm right, every action she's taken since the lapse is void. Lucas sat across from me, nodding slowly. And if you're wrong? I looked up. I'm not. That night, after dinner, I took my laptop into the den, Emma's old writing room, and pulled up the nonprofit corporate law for our state. I already knew most of it by heart, but this wasn't about what I knew. It was about building a case that no one could swat away with politics or bluster. I drafted the challenge in 3 parts. Part 1, lapsed corporate status. The HOA's failure to refile meant it lost, standing to collect, fine, or act as a legal body. I included certified documents and timelines. Part 2, procedural breach. The last board election was never followed up with public notice or reauthorization. Franklin's minutes proved it. The vote to require elections was binding. Colleen ignored it. Part 3, fraudulent representation. Colleen continued using the title president and issuing fines under a defunct entity. That, at best, was negligent. At worst, legally actionable. Then I attached scanned copies of all the violation letters and built a chart showing the total fines collected since the lapse, based on public emails, notices, and what neighbors had quietly told me. It added up to nearly $19,000. She hadn't just overstepped, she'd profited from it. I sat back and stared at the draft, hands folded. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was preparing to correct a broken system. When the document was done, I emailed a copy to a nonprofit legal foundation in the city. Not a formal filing, just a request for confirmation on my interpretation of standing law. They'd helped homeowners before. I didn't need them to represent me. I just needed to be sure I hadn't missed something. By morning, they responded with 1 sentence. Your position is correct under current state law. Corporate powers dissolve upon statutory lapse. I didn't smile, but something in my chest eased. Lucas came in later, holding 2 coffees. You slept? 4 hours, enough. You gonna serve it? Not yet. Why? Because she still thinks I'm bluffing, I said, and that gives me the element of surprise. He sat beside me, sipping slowly. You're going to use the rules. I'm going to honor them, I corrected. The ones she violated to build power. He tapped the folder. So what now? I flipped the file shut. Now I prepare the next phase, the submission, the timing, the witnesses. I'd need to trigger it at the next board meeting, with Franklin beside me, ideally, in front of as many neighbors as possible. Colleen's authority didn't collapse in private. It had to collapse in public. Only then would people stop being afraid. And the mural, it wasn't even the center of this anymore. It was the spark. Now it was about more than paint, more than one violation. It was about clearing rot from the roots of a place that used to feel like home. And it would start with a single phrase delivered in a room full of witnesses. Madam Chair, you're operating without legal standing. I knocked on Dana Tran's door just after dusk. She answered in slippers, holding a spreadsheet and a skeptical look. I'm not selling anything, I said, but I am going to ask you to help me collapse a small illegal regime. Her brow arched. Well, in that case, come in. Inside, her living room was clean and spare. 2 laptops open on the coffee table, one humming through QuickBooks and the other paused on a code enforcement PDF. She was still wearing her headset from work. She pushed it off her ear and motioned for me to sit. I need 3 things, I said. Community support, quiet witness prep, and people willing to show up at the board meeting this Thursday. You're going public? I'm going strategic. She leaned forward. Walk me through it. I did. I showed her the state filings, the legal lapse, the fine summaries. I explained how Colleen had continued issuing enforcement actions despite no standing authority. Dana's face shifted as I spoke, confusion giving way to realization, then to something close to rage. Michael, she said slowly, you realize if this is true, every single fine I paid was a scam. Exactly. She stood, walked to her printer, and yanked out a sheet. That's theft. I don't care if she meant well. You can't hold authority you don't legally have. Help me make it visible, I said. People don't believe it until they hear it in a room full of neighbors. She nodded. Who else do we have? Harold, the garden guy. He's in. So are the Ramoses. And I'm meeting Ruben tomorrow. I need at least 6 households represented. Enough to show it's not just me making noise. Dana opened her laptop and pulled up an email chain. I can reach the Salazars and the Lynn family. They got citations for flag height and porch light wattage last year. They're furious but quiet. They won't be after Thursday. She looked up. You sure you're ready for this? I've been ready since the day Colleen brought a master key to my garage and tried to erase my wife's face from the neighborhood. Dana's mouth tightened into a thin line of solidarity. We spent the next hour assembling a packet. Summaries, printouts, side-by-side comparisons of bylaw references and state statutes. She designed a basic presentation. Nothing fancy, just facts. I added annotations with my compliance credentials at the bottom of each page. If Colleen tried to shout me down, she'd be shouting through a wall of citations and certified stamps. At one point, Dana looked over at me and asked, "Why do this like a trial? Why not go to the press?" "Because this isn't about headlines," I said. "It's about restoring trust in rules, publicly, properly. And if she retaliates, she won't, she can't, not after this." She nodded again. By the time I left, we had commitments from 8 households and printed packets for 12, 2 backups. One for the county rep I'd quietly invited to sit in. No press, not yet. But enough presence to make sure the meeting was recorded, documented, undeniable. Back home, Lucas was polishing his boots. "You ready?" he asked. "Just getting started." "You think she'll fold?" "No," I said. "But I think her lies will." He set the boots aside and looked me in the eye. "Want me there in uniform?" "No," I said. "This time, wear civvies. Let them see you as the son of the woman they tried to erase." He nodded once. That was enough. The next morning, I called Franklin. He answered on the first ring. "Thursday," I said. "Board meeting, you ready?" A pause. "I will be," he said. "I've already pulled the red folder from her den. I made copies." "Bring them." "I plan to." Click. The line went dead, but I didn't feel alone. I felt ready. Colleen thought she'd won, thought she'd worn everyone down to dust. But we weren't dust. We were flint. And the strike was coming. Have you ever helped organize a quiet rebellion like this? Who would you bring into the room with you? Tell me below, and let me know where you're watching from. The HOA office was still locked when I arrived, early, intentionally. I didn't need access. I just wanted to stand there for a moment in the hallway outside the glass door and breathe. This was the last quiet moment before it all changed. The hallway smelled like printer toner and artificial lemon cleaner. A paper notice flapped on the inside of the door. HOA monthly board meeting, 7 p.m. Community Center, in bold, poorly spaced Arial, probably written by Colleen herself. Lucas walked up a moment later with a folded chair under one arm and a small box in the other. "What's the chair for?" I asked. "Ruben's request. Says he doesn't trust the metal ones they set out. Bad back." I almost smiled. He handed me the box. Inside were 12 folders. Dana's layout, my legal annotations, Franklin's copied minutes, one for each board member, one for each household representative, one extra in case someone decided to switch sides when the wind changed. "You hear from Franklin?" Lucas asked. "He texted me half an hour ago, said he's bringing the originals, said he's tired of standing in the doorway." About time. The sun was beginning to set behind the row of houses across the street. Lights flicked on behind blinds. Garage doors closed. It all looked normal, but inside those homes, people were getting ready to show up. By 6:45, they did. Dana arrived first, balancing a tray of iced coffee and a stack of printed name tags. "We're not angry," she said, handing me one. "We're organized." "Same thing," I murmured. Next came the Ramoses, the Salazars, Harold with his walking cane, and 2 new faces, quiet couples who had stayed out of things until now, all holding folders, all, wearing the same expression, tired but not defeated. When Franklin pulled up, he parked at the far end and walked slowly. He held a manila envelope to his chest like it was a shield. When he reached me, he handed it over without a word. Inside were Colleen's originals. Violations, citations, private memos. And at the top, an unsigned draft for a retroactive election amendment that had never passed. "She planned to backdate authority," Franklin said quietly. "But she never filed it." "She didn't think she'd need to," I replied. A few feet away, Lucas leaned against the community center railing. Board members just pulled up, all three. Colleen was last, of course. She stepped out of her SUV like she owned the pavement beneath her shoes. Clipboard, blazer, smile like a corporate brochure. She froze when she saw the crowd waiting by the doors. Dana didn't flinch. Neither did Harold. Franklin stepped forward and held the door open. "Madam Chair," he said evenly, "we're ready for you." She looked at him, blinked, just once, then walked past without answering. Inside, the rows of chairs filled fast. The ones closest to the board table were marked with red tape, reserved. But Dana removed the tape before Colleen could notice. Lucas handed out the folders silently. The junior board members flipped theirs open, frowned, and started whispering. Colleen hadn't sat down yet. I took my seat in the second row, folder already open in front of me. Lucas leaned in. "You sure she won't try to shut it down early? If she does, we file immediately." "You think she'll cave?" "No," I said. "She'll posture. And then she'll fall." At exactly 7 p.m., Colleen tapped the table twice and cleared her throat. "Let's begin," she said. The room fell into silence, but not submission. I looked around, 12 folders open, 3 quiet board members shifting in their seats, Franklin calm, finally centered, and behind us, 20 pairs of eyes watching every move. The trap wasn't just set, it was occupied. The chairs creaked as people shifted, restless and alert. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, like even the building knew something was about to snap. Colleen tapped her clipboard twice, feigning order. "Let's begin with Agenda Item 1, Ongoing Compliance Violations. Lot 212, Michael Landry." Franklin didn't look at her. He looked at me. I stood. "No," I said calmly. "Tonight, we're not starting with my mural. We're starting with whether this board has the authority to speak at all." Gasps weren't dramatic, just real. Colleen blinked. "Excuse me?" I held up the certified packet from the county office. As of April 12, 2018, Hillside Glen HOA failed to file its annual renewal with the state. It has not been reinstated. Under state nonprofit law, your standing as a corporation expired 5 years ago. That means no valid board, no valid fines, no valid authority. She stood too, fast, defensive. "That's ridiculous. We've been operating continuously, dues collected, meetings held, none of it filed, none of it legal," I interrupted. "You've been posing as a president of a dissolved entity. That's not a continuation. That's misrepresentation." Dana stood behind me. "And we've been paying thousands in fines based on that lie." Harold raised his cane. "I paid $300 for a garden violation last year. Where'd that money go, Colleen?" Now the murmurs began. The folders were open in every lap. Franklin cleared his throat and unfolded a single page. "These are the last valid board meeting minutes, dated March 2018. They show board terms expiring unless renewed by vote. That vote never happened. No election since. No filings since. No authority." Colleen's voice sharpened. "You're our secretary. You were part of every meeting." Franklin looked at her for the first time. "No, Colleen, I was part of your emails, your edits, your executive decisions. But there hasn't been a board, not a real one, not since we stopped voting." She turned to the other board members. "You're not going to let them hijack this meeting?" One of them, a woman named Janine, shook her head slowly. "You said everything was fine. You said we didn't have to worry about renewals, that we were just streamlining." Franklin stepped forward and placed Colleen's original violation ledger on the table, red folder, second shelf, just like he told me. "Your notes, your enforcement log, your handwriting, no oversight, no signatures." Colleen reached for it, too late. I placed my palm flat on the packet. "The county has a copy," I said. "So does a nonprofit legal watchdog. And as of this morning, a formal request has been submitted for a review of Hillside Glen's corporate history." Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Lucas stood now too, voice clear, measured. "You used a master key to threaten my father over a mural painted by my mother. You issued fines under a title you no longer had. And you tried to intimidate people into silence." Colleen backed up a step. "This is a coup," she snapped. "You've all conspired." "No," I said. "We complied with the law, something you stopped doing years ago. Janine stood as well. I move to suspend this meeting, Harold chimed in. Seconded. Franklin lifted his voice, clear, official. Motion to suspend current board authority pending reconstitution. Call for emergency election per original bylaws. I looked around the room, hands raised, one by one. Even people I didn't know by name, all of them watching her fall. Colleen's clipboard dropped to her side. Her knuckles were white. You don't understand what you're doing, she whispered. We understand perfectly, Franklin said. We're taking it back. Silence held for just a moment longer. And then Colleen walked out, slow, stiff, deflated. No one followed her. Lucas sat down beside me. That it? Almost. Because the mural still stood. And now, so did the neighborhood. Lucas and I walked home in silence. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was the kind that settles in after a storm, when the air still tastes of rain, but the clouds have moved on and left the street shining. The porch light was already on when we reached the house. The mural glowed under it, colors deepening in the dusk. Emma's eyes caught the light, just as they always did, watching, witnessing. I sat down on the swing. Lucas stood for a while, hands in his pockets, before finally lowering himself next to me. Feels different? He said quietly. It is. Not because Colleen was gone. She hadn't even returned her resignation yet. That would come. The formal election was scheduled for next month, this time with public notice and real ballots. Franklin agreed to stay on through the transition. Janine would likely take over, and from the way she'd looked Colleen in the eye during the vote, I trusted her to clean house. But none of that was the point. The point was that fear had finally let go of this place. Harold was planting again. Dana had offered to help manage digital communications. The Salazars knocked on my door this morning just to say thank you, and left behind a tray of something that smelled suspiciously like lemon bars. I hadn't opened the folders again. I didn't need to. The truth had done its work. You think she'll come back? Lucas asked, not looking at me. She might. And if she does? She'll be a neighbor, not a ruler. He nodded and leaned back, letting the swing creak beneath us. I was thinking, he said after a moment, we should seal the mural. I turned to him. Like, coat it, he said. So it lasts longer. Mom painted it by hand. We ought to protect it the same way you protected her name. My throat tightened, but I smiled. Yeah, I like that. The next morning, I picked up a clear sealant from the hardware store, the same brand Emma used on her outdoor canvas frames. I spent the afternoon brushing it on carefully, line by line. When the last coat dried, I stepped back and saw the colors pop with a kind of clarity they hadn't had since she first painted it. It didn't look like the end of a fight. It looked like the beginning of a promise. A few days later, I stood before the community again, this time under the pavilion near the playground. No folders, no speeches, just a conversation, a recommitment. Janine had organized the event, calling it a reset meeting. Dana brought flyers with links to a new HOA transparency portal. Franklin wore a simple name tag. Franklin. Not hiding anymore. Someone laughed at that. And it felt good. No one mentioned Colleen. She hadn't returned any emails. Her car hadn't been seen on her usual morning walks, but she didn't need to be present to be part of the aftermath. The system she built had collapsed. The fear she counted on had evaporated. What replaced it was slower, quieter, but stronger. I walked home later that evening, alone this time. Lucas had returned to base, said goodbye the way soldiers do. Quick hug, long stare, no drama, just the weight of what had passed between us. When I reached the driveway, the mural caught the last light of sunset, and I thought about what we'd done, not just to save a painting, but to reclaim a place, a memory, a voice. This house wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours again. Emma's, Lucas's, mine, and every neighbor who decided silence wasn't enough. You never know how deep the rot goes until someone's brave enough to lift the floorboards. And when you do, when you shine light where fear used to live, sometimes the whole damn structure shifts. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a porch swing. Sometimes it's a sealed mural. Sometimes it's a quiet secretary who finally says, enough. Sometimes the only power you need is proof and the patience to let it speak. Share your HOA stories in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. You're not alone, not anymore.